It was late, and I was beyond exhausted. The kind of tired where your body feels heavy, your mind is foggy, and every step feels like a chore. I boarded the last train home, settling into a seat near the middle of the car. It was nearly empty as expected, just a few scattered passengers, their faces hidden behind phones or buried in books. I leaned my head back, closing my eyes for a moment, trying to tune out the hum of the train. The day had been a nightmare of meetings and deadlines, and all I wanted was to crawl into bed, but something felt off. I opened my eyes, scanning the car again, and that's when I noticed him. A man sat a few rows away, directly across the aisle from me, staring. Not the casual glance you give someone when you're bored. No, this was different. His eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. I shifted in my seat, uncomfortable but trying not to make it obvious. Maybe he was zoning out, I thought, looking in my direction but not really seeing me. I checked my phone, pretending to be absorbed in it, but I could still feel his gaze. I looked up again, and he was still there, watching. My stomach twisted. Okay, I thought, don't panic. Just keep calm. It's late. He could be tired too. The train continued, stopping at the usual stations, but the man never moved. Each stop, I watched him, waiting for him to get off, but he didn't. As we approached the next stop, I decided to test it. I gathered my things, standing as if I was about to leave, but when I stood, so did he. My heart pounded in my chest. I froze, unsure of what to do next. I sat back down quickly, trying to appear casual, and to my horror, he sat too, mirroring my exact movements. This wasn't a coincidence. He was following me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was just weird, a harmless creep. But something deep inside told me this wasn't normal. Every fiber of my being screamed that something was wrong. My mind raced, plotting how to get out of this situation. I couldn't just get off at my stop, not if he was planning to follow me home. With each passing stop, the car emptied out until it was just me, the man, and a woman sitting at the far end who seemed oblivious to everything. The train rolled through a dark tunnel, the lights flickering overhead, and that's when I made my decision. I'd get off at a random stop, somewhere busy, somewhere public. I could call for help or even pretend to meet someone. The next station was coming up. I stood, trying not to let my panic show, and made my way to the doors. The man stood too, following me step by step. My pulse raced as the train slowed, the doors sliding open with a mechanical hiss. I stepped off, trying to act normal, and walked briskly toward the exit. But something stopped me. A feeling like a sudden realization hitting me all at once. I turned around and he was still there, watching, but he didn't move. And that's when I noticed it. The woman from the far end of the train was now standing beside him, closer than before, and they were talking. Not just talking though, they were watching me, together. My blood turned to ice. I had been so focused on the man, I hadn't noticed the woman. And then it clicked. She had been on every train ride for the past few weeks. Different clothes, sitting in different spots, but it was her. Always there, always looking down, always too quiet. They weren't strangers, they had been working together. This wasn't some random stalker. I had been watched, tracked for weeks. I turned to run, but as I did, I felt a hand grip my shoulder from behind. It hit me like a wave. The woman, the man, they had been following me together. My mind raced, my pulse hammering in my ears. I could barely think, but I had to get out. I turned to bolt, but before I could take a step, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. My heart leapt into my throat. For a split second, I thought it was him. "Hey, are you okay?" A voice asked, startled but concerned. It wasn't the man. It was a passerby, an older man with kind eyes, clearly alarmed by the panicked look on my face. I hesitated, breathing heavily, caught between fight and flight. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see the man and woman closing in on me, ready to strike. But when I looked, they were gone. Just like that, vanished. The station platform was eerily empty. "They were just right there," I stammered, pointing to the spot where the two had been standing moments ago. The older man followed my gesture but saw nothing. Two people. They were following me. He frowned, confused, but his concern was genuine. "Do you need help? Should we call the police?" I looked around again, my head spinning. It didn't make sense. How could they have disappeared so quickly? My paranoia must have been written all over my face, but I nodded. "Yes, please," I said, my voice shaky. I think they've been following me for weeks." The man stayed with me as we moved to a safer, more crowded area of the station. He called the police, and within minutes, officers arrived to take my statement. I recounted everything: the man, the woman, their strange behavior, how they had been shadowing me. The officers listened intently, one of them jotting down notes as I talked. By the time I was finished, I felt drained, like the fear had sucked the life out of me. One officer spoke calmly, assuring me they'd review the security footage from the train and the station. I hoped there'd be some proof that I wasn't losing my mind. As they escorted me outside, I couldn't help but keep glancing over my shoulder, half expecting the two to reappear. But they never did. The station, the streets, everything seemed normal, quiet, but the paranoia lingered. It was hard to shake the feeling that someone could be watching me still, even if they weren't there. A few days later, the police called me back with their findings. I was anxious, hoping for answers, some kind of closure. The officer on the phone sounded serious. "We reviewed the footage and you're right. There was a man and a woman near you on the train and at the station." I felt a chill as he continued. But here's the strange part. They've been seen before. A few months ago, we had a similar report. A woman claimed the same two people had been following her for weeks, but we couldn't track them down, and then they just vanished. I went cold. "Did you ever find out who they were?" The officer hesitated. "No, but after that woman filed her report, she stopped seeing them. Maybe they move on once they've been noticed." I wanted to feel relieved, but I couldn't. The officer offered to increase patrols near my building, just in case. I thanked him, hanging up the phone, but the unease remained. Weeks passed, and slowly, life returned to normal. I stopped taking the late train. I changed my routine, taking different routes home, keeping an eye out for anything suspicious. For a while, I'd glance over my shoulder every time I stepped outside, but nothing happened. No strange faces, no one watching me. Then one evening, as I sat at a cafe, my phone buzzed with a new notification. I absentmindedly opened it, a photo. I stared at it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a picture of me, taken from the window of the cafe. The angle was too familiar, like someone watching from the street outside. And just beyond the frame, in the reflection of the glass, I saw them, the man and the woman, standing there, looking right at me. They were still watching. It was supposed to be a harmless adventure, just something fun to do after school. Jake and I had always talked about exploring the old train yard near the edge of town, so when we finally had the chance, we didn't think twice. The place had been abandoned for years, with rusted tracks and crumbling train cars scattered like forgotten toys. It was eerie, sure, but we weren't scared. Not yet anyway. "Check this out," Jake said, waving me over as he pushed through a patch of overgrown bushes. Hidden behind the thicket was an old rail car, its paint chipped and the windows dark and broken. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. "No way," I muttered. "How did we miss this?" We squeezed through the gap where the door used to be. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust, but something felt off immediately. It didn't have the vibe of a place left untouched. Blankets were piled up in the corner, and there were empty food containers scattered on the floor. Someone had been living here, recently. Jake and I exchanged a look, and my stomach twisted with unease. "Maybe we should go," I whispered, already inching toward the door, but Jake was already moving deeper into the car. "Hold up, Tim. Look at this." He crouched down near a pile of clothes. At first, I thought it was just old junk, but when I got closer, my heart skipped a beat. There were IDs and wallets strewn across the floor, dozens of them. Some looked brand new, others worn with age, but all of them belonged to different people. "This isn't right," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to leave." "Yeah, I think we stumbled onto something bad," Jake agreed, but just as we turned to head out, we heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside the rail car. Slow, deliberate. Whoever had been living here was coming back. "Hide," Jake hissed, and we scrambled into the shadows behind an old crate, trying to make ourselves as small as possible. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure whoever was outside would hear it. The footsteps got louder, closer, and I could see the shadow of a figure through the broken window, moving slowly along the side of the car. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't come inside. But then I noticed something strange. The footsteps didn't match up. There were two sets, faint but distinct. One was coming from outside, but the other was coming from the opposite end of the rail car. Inside. I turned to Jake, my eyes wide with panic, but before I could say anything, the door creaked open. A man stepped inside, his face hidden beneath the hood, and he scanned the room as if sensing something was off. He walked toward the pile of blankets, his back to us, but then I heard it. Another footstep, this one directly behind us. I froze. Jake did too. Slowly, I turned my head, just in time to see a second figure, their face gaunt and pale, emerging from the shadows at the back of the car. They had been in there with us the whole time, watching, waiting, and now we were trapped. Before I could react, the man by the blankets turned around and locked eyes with us. He didn't say a word, just smiled. "Looks like we've got company," he said, his voice cold and calm. Then the lights outside the rail car flickered, illuminating the second figure fully for the first time. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just anyone. It was Jake. The Jake who was standing right next to me. My mind spun in confusion. I looked at the Jake beside me, his face pale, eyes wide with fear, then back at the other one, identical in every way. I opened my mouth to scream, but before I could, the door slammed shut. It felt like the world had just stopped. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. Two Jakes, one standing beside me, wide-eyed and terrified, and the other grinning eerily in the dim light, standing near the blankets. My mind spun in confusion, trying to grasp what was happening. "Tim," the Jake beside me whispered, his voice trembling. "What the hell is going on?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was frozen, staring at the two versions of my best friend, trying to figure out if I was losing my mind. Then the man by the blankets, the one who looked just like Jake, took a step forward. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice calm but unsettling. "But since you are, you'll need to choose." "Choose?" I managed to croak out, my throat dry. "What are you talking about?" The man, Jake, or whoever he was, grinned wider. "One of us is real, one of us isn't, but you already knew that, didn't you?" I looked at the Jake standing beside me. The fear in his eyes was real, palpable. I could feel his panic, the way his hand trembled slightly as he gripped my arm. This was the Jake I knew, my best friend. But as I glanced back at the other one, doubt crept in. "Tim," my Jake said, his voice cracking, "we need to get out of here, now." But the other Jake's smile never wavered. "Are you sure? Are you sure you're with the right one?" I was about to lose it. My head throbbed with questions. How was this possible? How could there be two of them? "Enough of this," I finally said, stepping back, trying to steady myself. "I don't care who you are, we're leaving." The eerie Jake's grin faltered for the first time, and for a moment I thought maybe I'd gotten through. But then he spoke again, his voice low and threatening. "If you leave with the wrong one, you'll never know it. Not until it's too late." His words struck me like a blow. How could I be sure? I looked at my Jake again, my real Jake. I had known him for years, every expression, every nervous twitch, every moment of doubt. I knew him better than anyone. But this situation was impossible. My gut twisted with fear. "Don't listen to him, Tim," Jake pleaded beside me, pulling me closer. "It's me, okay? We're getting out of here." The other Jake stood still, watching us with a calm intensity. I could feel the tension mounting, the pressure to act building by the second. Finally, I made a decision. "We're leaving," I said, my voice firmer now. "And you're staying." Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my Jake by the arm and bolted toward the door. My heart was pounding as I shoved it open and stumbled out of the rail car, pulling Jake along with me. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, but I didn't stop. We ran as fast as we could, our footsteps echoing in the empty train yard. We didn't look back. By the time we reached the edge of the yard, my chest was burning and my mind was racing. We slowed to a stop, both of us panting heavily. I turned to Jake, relief flooding over me. We were out, we were safe. But as I caught my breath, I noticed something odd. Jake was silent, his eyes wide and distant, staring straight ahead. I waved a hand in front of his face. "Jake, you good, man?" He blinked slowly, then turned to face me. His expression was blank, devoid of the usual warmth. Something felt off. "What's wrong?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. "I'm fine," he said, but the way he said it sent a chill down my spine. His voice sounded flat. emotionless, like someone trying too hard to sound normal. I took a step back, the realization hitting me all at once. Had I made the wrong choice? Was this the real Jake? Or, before I could say anything else, Jake smiled. A slow, unnatural smile that stretched across his face. "Let's go home," he said, his tone eerily calm. I stared at him, my heart pounding again, and for the first time I wasn't sure who I was looking at. But we were miles from the rail car now, and I couldn't go back. So I nodded, swallowed hard, and followed him into the night.